Good morning, everyone. We are glad to welcome you to our webinar, which is dedicated to the student housing market in the Nordics. This is another online event in the series of webinars organized by our company, and I really hope that you will enjoy the findings and analysis which I'll present today. Let me start share my screen. First of all, let me please introduce Bonart. We are a global data and research team headquartered in Vienna and with other offices globally. Our core business is delivering reliable data and insights to back up the strategic decision making of investors, developers, operators, governments, and funds. We cover a variety of rented residential markets, but our prime focus is the student housing asset class. Currently, our existing database covers more than 300 local markets with almost 2.5 million PBSA beds and more than 15,000 assets. We are proud to be collaborating with the top-notch companies in the world, which are our long-term partners. On this slide, you can see some of the clients we provide our services to, and I'm sure that you're familiar with all of them. One of our key products is the Bonart platform, which contains granular and up-to-date PBSA data for more than 300 markets and hundreds of KPIs. PBSA market leaders are subscribed to this tool to have constant access to these in-housing metrics and keep track of the most recent trends. On the right, you can see the detailed list of Bonart services provided on the ad hoc basis. Alongside these, we organize PBSA property tours for our clients, which provide PBSA market players with, I would say, tremendous opportunities to visit high quality, top-notch PBSA assets, have discussions with operators, and explore this asset class in detail. In roughly 2 weeks, on September 23rd and 21st, we will hold another property tour. This time it will be in Copenhagen. So if you are interested in participating, feel free to liaise with our team. When it comes to our coverage of the Nordics, you can see the distribution of the cities on the map. Currently, we cover 16 biggest cities in Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, which accommodate the vast majority of students in these countries. Currently, the Nordic countries record relatively high student numbers. As you can see, Sweden is the largest market with almost 500,000 students, of whom 43,000 are internationals. Despite having a smaller student population in general, Denmark and Finland accommodate a very similar number of international students. If you compare the overall and international student population to the neighboring countries, it becomes visible that the Baltics are much smaller markets, whereas Poland and the Netherlands feature a significantly bigger student population. Overall, the total student population is growing at roughly 2% on average per year in Finland, Norway, and Sweden. Denmark is an exception, so the student population here is on a decline amid weaker demographics and cuts of some English taught programs. When it comes to international students, and you see the dynamics of international student population on this graph, it is visible that the majority of student cities in the Nordics showcase stable growth, which contributes to the overall rising demand for student housing. These two graphs represent the maximums and minimums of total and international students in the Nordic cities. As you can see, the dynamics are positive in the majority of the cities, and it was obvious from the previous slide. We think that it underpins the growing demand for the PBSA asset class in these countries. When it comes to the international student origin, you can see the top three sourcing countries for Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden on this slide. Overall, the Nordics are very diverse markets. For example, the biggest cohort in Denmark, I mean Germans, occupies only 11% in total international body. And actually, this is the biggest pool of international students. The same pattern can be observed in other countries as well, as you can see. So in general, these markets are dominated by German, Chinese, and Indian students. Alongside demand, let's look at the development of supply. It definitely lags behind the demand, which points to a great investment opportunity in this market. If you take a look at the chart on the right, you can see how scarce the private PBSA stock is in the majority of cities. For example, Copenhagen is the most developed in terms of private stock. You can see the number of private beds here. So currently this city records almost 10,000 private PBSA beds, whereas other cities feature a few private residences despite the strong demand for student housing. And this is a great opportunity for private investors indeed. As can be seen, the share of private stock stands at 20% in Denmark and Sweden. Please take a look at the pie shares below. At the same time, in Finland and Norway, it equals just 6 and 7% respectively. As a benchmark, with the UK, the most mature market in Europe, stands at 58% when it comes to the share of private stock. So if you compare 58% to the share of private stock in these countries, I think it's possible to make a conclusion that these markets are still too mature. So the less mature markets will probably follow a similar path as the more mature markets, increasing the share of private PBSA beds in the total stock in the future. So this means that the current private PBSA segment should increase manifold to meet the growing student demand, especially when it comes to the international students, because usually this is a primary target audience for private providers in the PBSA sector. And as you saw in the previous slides, the number of international students is growing. The prominent trend on the global PBSA market, not just in Nordics, is the constantly improving quality of the PBSA stock. So the students are more and more demanding when it comes to the amenities on site, and investors and developers are trying their best to tailor new schemes towards the market expectations. So based on our analysis, we identified the distribution of amenities in the residences in Nordics. And as you can see on this chart, currently laundry, terrace, or outdoor area, bike storage, and multifunctional room are among the most widely available amenities in these markets. However, at the same time, for example, gym is offered by only 16% of the residences in Nordics. And based on the infield surveys, we know that this is one of the most sought after amenities in the PBSA sector. And actually, students are willing to see it in the private PBSA stock. So it's worthwhile to pay attention to these details while developing the concept of PBSA schemes. Bonard tracks the development of PBSA residences across Europe, particularly in Nordics. So we collect information for the projects which are in planning and under construction. And on these maps, you can see the beds in operation and beds in the pipeline in the biggest Nordics cities. Currently, the number of pipeline projects is very scarce. Stockholm and Oslo stand alone in terms of the PBSA beds being built or under construction. So you can see that currently these two cities feature 4,000 and 1,600 beds respectively. So the pipeline in these two locations are the richest one among the cities in Nordics. The newly built stock in other cities is far smaller. And indeed, it can't lead to bridging the growing demand-supply gap. Some Nordic cities, for example, Aarhus, Malmo, and Turku, lack the PBSA pipeline at all. And these cities, they are experiencing the growing student population at the same time, as you saw on the previous slides. Just to emphasize the scale of the shortage and the possibility to bridge it, we are 100% sure that it's not being addressed now in full. And I'd like to provide an example of the top 5 Swedish cities. So, namely, Stockholm, Gothenburg, Lund, Malmo, and Uppsala. Cumulatively, these 5 cities lack around 80,000 PBSA beds, whereas the aggregated pipeline stands at only 7,000 beds, which is far from enough to cover even existing demand. So you can imagine if the markets lack almost 73,000 beds, so the existing stock should be doubled or even tripled just to meet the existing demand. And even if it's going to be the case, then these markets won't be oversaturated, but just on the level of market balance between supply and demand. When it comes to the existing portfolios, which are signs of maturing markets, there are several that are relatively big. Hereby, by portfolios, I mean brands with more than one asset under operation or in the pipeline. So the majority of them are operated by Heimstaden, SBS, K2A, Live to Grow, and Seor. So as you can see on the chart, cumulatively, these top 5 brands cover 66% of all PBSA beds in the portfolio. So in total, the portfolios in Nordics comprise almost 35,000 beds. So indeed, this market is less mature than, for example, the UK, which is the leading one in terms of the number and size of the portfolios. But we are confident that this is something Nordics market will experience in the future. I mean, the consolidation and creation of bigger portfolios, which will attract more of the institutional capital. Overall, the private PBSA stock in the Nordics is relatively consolidated, with a few cities featuring 100% of stock being run within portfolios. For example, you can see this on the chart below. Private PBSA in Bergen, Malmo, and Uppsala are operated as a part of a bigger portfolio. Actually, all of the beds, 100% of the beds, are in the portfolios of big operators. At the same time, the share of private stock run within portfolios stands at 70% in Copenhagen and 71% in Lund. So there are some cities where the consolidation isn't still there. So you can see that it's Aalborg and Aarhus, where just below 50% of total PBSA, private PBSA beds operated within portfolios. PBSA rent levels in Nordics increased fast in 2023 and 2024 amid rising costs and strong demand. As can be seen, the PBSA rents in 2022 increased just by 1.6% in Denmark and Finland, and by 1% in Sweden, which is pretty in line with the inflation. However, the situation changed dramatically in 2023, 2024. So you can see it on the charts. The PBSA rental growth sped up significantly and approached roughly 5-7% range across 3 countries. So you can see that in Sweden, the rental growth stood at 6.5%, whereas it fluctuated around 5% in Denmark. In 2024, the rents in Denmark continued to grow at a substantial 6%, whereas Finland and Sweden experienced a slowdown in rental growth, following a general trend of softening of inflation. You can compare the rental growth in 2024 to the inflation in the same year. So when it comes to the inflation, it was way lower than the rental growth on the PBSA sector. So in Denmark, it stood at 1.3, 1% in Finland and 2% in Sweden. Even though the PBSA growth, PBSA rent growth slowed down in Finland and Sweden, it stood well above the inflation, the same as Denmark, actually. And it indeed ensured the robust margin for PBSA operators and investors, and actually overpacing growth of rents in the PBSA sector over inflation. It actually points to the healthy demand and long-term perspective of this asset. Even though the Nordics are smaller than the majority of other European markets and the private portfolios are still limited, these destinations featured a decent transaction activity last year compared to the COVID times. Indeed, these markets can be compared with the more matured ones, such as the UK, but given the size of these markets, the transaction volumes were robust. Overall, as can be seen on this chart, the transaction volumes in Denmark reached almost €1 billion in 2024-2025 combined, whereas in Sweden, 2024 was the most active, recording almost €270 million transaction volumes. When it comes to the yields, they're available primarily for big cities where transaction activities have taken place over the recent years. So you can see the dynamics of yields below. Copenhagen and Stockholm are the most represented cities in terms of the yields for the reason I just mentioned. So currently the average yield stands at 4.3% in Copenhagen and 4.5% in Stockholm. So in other cities, it was similar a few years ago. Over the recent years, in general, the market witnessed the yield expansion amid the growing interest rates and inflation. So these were two main reasons for the expansion of yields. However, most recent data and actually our observations show that there are signs of stabilization, which reflect the softening of macro conditions globally and in Europe particularly. And I would like to say that this is the very much similar trend we observe in other countries. So recently we finished analysis for Germany, and we saw that in 2025 there are some cities where the yield is being even compressed. But indeed, it's too early to say that this is the long-term trend. These were probably all the insights we wanted to share with you today as part of the main presentation. Just to summarize, the Nordic PBSA market remains super attractive for institutional investors due to the very strong socioeconomic fundamentals. And today you saw part of them. So I would just mention such fundamentals as stable and sometimes growing demand, insufficient supply, a huge shortage of PBSA beds, and a great number of missing PBSA beds, especially in the private segment. Very stable and high occupancy rates. So in the majority of cities, they are reaching 95, 100%. But here I would say that this is a very standard situation for the European market, which is heavily undersupplied. That's why the occupancy rates are very high. Indeed, high purchasing power of local and international students, which allow investors to go for the premium pricing, as well as stable rental growth, which is above the inflation. And we would encourage all investors, developers, and operators to continue exploring opportunities in these highly attractive markets. Thank you very much for your attention to the presentation. As of now, we have a few minutes left. Can check the questions. Thank you very much for your questions. So first of all, I'll start from yields on rent or NOI. So these are yields on NOI. And another question from Johan. Thanks very much for this. What drives the recent drop of international students in Denmark? This is a very good question. So now we think that the main reason for dropping numbers of international students in Denmark is cutting the scholarship and grants programs, which were dedicated to non-EU and EU students. So it led actually to the decline in the total number of international students in these countries. So we see that currently there are some initiatives in Denmark which might spur the inflow of international students, but it is too early to say. So that's why it's fair to predict that maybe in the next few years, it's fair to expect very slight decline in international students as well. Thank you. Thank you very much for your questions. And final remark, we can conclude at this point. I think that thank you very much for attending this event, and we would love to encourage all attendees to follow us on LinkedIn to stay tuned to all the events Bonard will be holding in the future. The recordings of the webinar will be distributed afterwards, so you will have a chance to check data and our conclusions one more time. Thank you and goodbye.